that a new nuclear activist has appeared in Finland, so I know about these same topics. The capacity of the new plants is also enough for significant export to Central Europe, where energy production is becoming the apple of the eye of environmental activists and authorities. Our strong bedrock is suitable for the final disposal of nuclear waste. We no longer export waste from our nuclear power plants abroad, but take care of it ourselves, as the authorities are already planning. Just nuclear invaders in Finland. Yes, yes. But really, if that copper hole is there, if you check the broadcast, then there is a link, so welcome as a guest. So it's such a rare treat in the modern world that someone still dares to criticize nuclear power, because it is the most perfect invention in the world that humanity has ever invented anywhere, and it should not be criticized at any point. For example, how about this? How about we take the discussion to the deepest end right away? Are we discussing helium-3 energy? What is a fusion plant? Now in Germany they are developing this, that it is like a future modeling of nuclear power, where there is no longer that radioactive component. And this is what nuclear perium, the Russian nuclear atomic power. In a way, all military geopolitical tensions are related to this fusion-powered nuclear power struggle. Yeah! Because that helium-3 technology is currently rushing into Western countries at a fast pace. So I can now summarize that system a little. So the fusion reactor we're talking about is 160 million degrees in a reactor, with a temperature of 160 million degrees. But this helium-3 reactor required 450 million degrees. So as you understand, they're not that far apart from each other anymore, their temperatures. And then the helium-3, it's really something that no longer releases those dangerous neutrons. And because of that, it's still infinitely relevant, and there won't be any more plutonium bombs made in it, and that's it, that's exactly it. And that reactor has all the properties that are said, that there's so-called nuclear power, so-called small compact energies, and so on. So they have a terribly narrow option to no longer ban it from replacing this much more deadly fission than the current one. And this was also part of the background. Germany made this so-called open paper. So they developed this fusion reactor as if to the end, and you said here's an open concept. Do a bit like Elon Musk. Hey, take a patent for this. Here is an open concept that anyone can make a working fusion reactor according to this formula. And it now looks strongly like Finland is going to be the first to strike. But Teemu, I found someone there. Was it American? Talk about it now. What is it? Is it still there? So that helium revenge. So there are American companies that are working on those projects at the moment. Was it said there? Did they already say that helium triad in that American one? Or was it even so? So it is something like Helion Energy Incorporation. So it is a Yankee fusion technology company that is currently developing this fusion reactor. Then the fuel that is used in it is deuterium and helium triad. Then it was founded in Everett, Washington in 2013. This company and its company's goal is to develop a linear fusion system, Magneto International Fusion, where plasma is compressed in magnetic fields in a pulse form and energy is released. So the central idea is to produce this so-called ultronic fusion, where helium-3 can act as fuel in a reaction that produces fewer neutrons. This then potentially simplifies the reactor structure and reduces radiation problems. The company in question is currently worth billions of US dollars. Yeah. There's a lot of money going around there at the moment. I would say that's a pretty crazy schedule for the system that America is planning. No, it's like it's going to replace current nuclear power, and then there's some kind of transition schedule. And of course, as I remember, there was a company in Japan that was developing that helium at the moment. Oh yeah, this was the Finnish version, so it was with it. It wasn't with it. It wasn't the classic 50 years ago, but here we're talking about a few years, maybe even throwing in some more years, like 27. I don't remember exactly, but there's this company in Japan called ESA, which focuses on lunar research, but one of that company's projects is specifically digging up helium-3 from the moon and returning it to Earth. Yeah, it sounds like a bit of an exotic system, but the idea is that robots dig it up in a capsule, and then it's sent from there. That's the benefit of it, and I don't know. But I have an idea that this helium can also be processed on Earth at the same time as tritium and deuterium are made on Earth. At the same time, let's say helium triple stacks, but there really is a lot of it. Yeah. Oh my. Yeah. I forgot the year where Arto was talking about. The year was 2028, so if I remember correctly, by that year, the plan would be to build the first fusion reactor. Yeah, and wasn't that Finnish reactor too? It wasn't quite toys right away that it's 100 megawatts, so it's a Finnish project too. So yes, this is so the nuclear power problem is this, that it's energy negative. Here's that chathead chat was waiting for now, yeah? Or was it anyway? Yeah, that was GPT I discussed this with. That for example, this Kazakh plant that currently produces half of the world's uranium, so the idea is to completely wallow 20 kilowatts of soil and 1 kilowatt of nuclear power out. So it's absolutely outrageously energy negative activity. This Talbavarahan is even at very similar levels the only and greatest production income in Europe. So this straight together already means what this just said, that nuclear power, so energy production is strongly energy intensive. It's over 10 times energy intensive, and you GPT people, when we were running these things, it gets 20 times more energy negative, and the levels are decreasing all the time with nuclear power. So they have huge problems here, that nuclear power has been around since 2008. It's all about energy-intensive energy, just for military needs. And in no way is this system trying to be safe and healthy. Now there's something coming. So are we going to drive a gun at the snake? That's why we're moving to plutonium, which is 1,000 times more dangerous than it is now, and that's also energy negative. And that's just the purpose of that weapon bomb, weapon uranium and plutonium, first of all. We have to get it done, as the dumb one said, at any cost. That's what you say. The economic outlook here has been ruined for a long time. But now the problem is starting when there's not enough energy. There's not enough energy, because everyone understands, if you have to put 20 times more fossil fuels in than you can get out of nuclear power, then it's quite difficult to run this energy economy for a long time. Where is it in the whole? For example, here is a company like Pulsar Helium, which is a company operating in the energy, gas, and mineral sector, which studies the occurrence of helium in the geological formations of the Earth. Then this Pulsar Helium, they have found 3 big ones, and then they have a mine like Jetstream, and there is a project like Topaz. So it is a mine operating in the United States, and there have been analyses done, where helium-3 concentrations have been up to 14.5. What is this parts per ppb? This helium-3 is found there in Minnesota. So it is there that a very rare large top has been found on Earth, and then we are now thinking about how we can burn it and use it. Then they are even planning separation methods to get helium-3 from helium-4. which are then completely different projects in scale. And then there is this company like Interon again. So it's a startup company that focuses on mining space resources, especially from the surface of the moon, and in the future they're going to mine helium-3 isotopes from the lunar regolith, that is, the surface layer of the moon. Yeah. So what's the question here? Juhani asked this. Energy negativity. Energy negativity is so simple, and if you think about the bedrock of Finland, which is now mostly granite, you understand that it has to be crushed and broken up in huge quantities. Then some 0.002% of total uranium, and from that too there is only some less than a percent of that combustible uranium. So you understand that those millions of tons, so the area starts from there was supposed to come 600,000 kg of that uranium, but when it is 238 mil to do practically nothing, so it remains in hand, and indeed, it is from 400 kilos to a maximum of 600 kilograms per year what Talvivaara was able to produce during the 10 years of test excavation, and that is public information, and from that they started to calculate those energy balances, so it is quite absurd that. Is that so? The weather GPT fell there will be a loss when in normal coal combustion it comes to 880, was it now 880 G, or something like that? Then it becomes a winter hazard, it comes to over 5 kilograms of that carbon dioxide per kilowatt hour produced, just because of the basic losses. I mean, it's practically impossible, you think, but it's the only and largest uranium mine in Europe, and the energy balances are like throwing away energy. Even in Kazakhstan, I heard it goes. I was wondering where the energy goes in Kazakhstan. There are 10,000 huge pumps, many hundreds of thousands of Quinton pumps, that water there, and you say the energy consumption is absolutely insane. You understand, those pumps all run on fossil diesel, no matter where the connection method is. There is no actual mining here, but you say that the massive transfer of water also makes it 20 times more energy negative, and it produces half of the world's uranium, so they are completely screwed with this energy. Now it's one thing to wonder why this electric car industry is being driven despite everything. So look, all the fossil fuel is now going to these uranium mines and others, because the mining industry and the army need all the traffic. So now there was no way to give civilian cars anything else but to use the electricity that happens to be left. So now you're starting to understand. This electric car boom is not so black and white either. So in reality, the nuclear power industry definitely wants to increase the number of electric cars so that their uranium mine doesn't have enough fossil fuel. There are huge problems there in Russia at the moment, when civilians don't want to have enough fuel anymore, but the army is taking such huge amounts from there for the war, and there's like a screaming shortage. Yeah. There is no more uranium in any country, so in an energy positive sense, that there is certainly what I would ask. So Australia, don't wait, there is still one mine in Canberra, where they have extracted all the uranium in those rock crevices, and to some extent there may be some individual places where there are concentrations, but on a global level it is like the class 0.0.4% the zero limit. So now, they are mining uranium from there from somewhere 0.02% of the concentrations, and the whole time a downward trend. So think about it, even as late as the turn of the year, so the uranium content in the world was 4%, a 4% has dropped so fast the pace of uranium globally. What is left ever, the idea is that the best have been dug up to nothing yet, just like that was at Rama is also coming like that. There is some artificial methane, and so on. So the fuels are so they all go into these uranium mining systems, so they just have to develop this. And it's an exciting thing with wind power and solar power. These artificial fuels are made, and then they mine uranium in the end. The system, electric combustion needs coal, they refine. Like carbon dioxide, and further refine it into carbon derivatives and methane, and this type of whatever it is. There they are looking for these different what I have heard, methane already, yes, they can do absolutely anything, completely liquid combustion. Ammonia has sometimes been talked about, all these what they thought what is worth, but you like liquefied methane is one such thing that comes to. Mind ya, carbon dioxide, hydrogen, hydrocarbon is made artificially. Enormously energy benefits are weak and so on. If you're talking about this data center thing, Finland will have 12 billion euros in investments in data centers between 2025 and 2030. 45,000 job gains. It's claimed that it has this kind of employment effect. Then it's claimed here that the tax effects are said to be 1.7 billion euros, consisting of, among other things, property taxes, income taxes, and value-added taxes. Then it's claimed that the capacity of its data center will currently grow from 285 megawatt-hours to 1.5 gigawatt-hours. We have to remember about the data center here. Now the Finnish state changed that tax benefit, that it's now a 20 times higher tax on that data center. And then, there's another thing that's been talked about very little. Thingariti said that no equipment over 10 megawatts can be connected to their network, the entire southern Finland network, in 2 years. I mean, it limits big data centers, all sand battery systems, solar power, wind power, everything has been left as if zeroed with this system. It's a really harsh system. A really harsh system, that it's limited so strictly. This is what a water turbine does. It's from the power plant, and then here you have to remember here really during the balance sheet it said that the efficiency of nuclear power never exceeds 25%, even in theory it might be, and we are talking about some TDOK lying part, they have a 50% efficiency in these powers, i.e. This is so full of lies, and false messages, and information there is like no limit here. The thing, that's true, the circuit is made of wood biodiesel they gasified, or isn't that Marina Matra has something that is injected like that gas is gasified with systems, like that I have heard at least, i.e. coal. Was it carbon monoxide mixed in these? There are different versions what is injected that is otherwise true what is written in that chat. Now is true what is written in that chat, so this data center job is the taxpayers pay for it. There is nothing else for its purpose than maintaining that digital identity. So the smartphone will have an application where all the payment lines will be entered. I want to abolish all cash so that every single person can be controlled. And in Britain, it is already the case that Prime Minister Keir Starmer is saying that if you do not agree to a digital identity, you will not be able to work at all. So it is the same thing as the Corona passport mess a few years ago. It was kind of like a pilot for this. It was a pilot for this so-called digital identity slavery. You have to remember that there is such an element in the data center that it was said that if the way the data center operates, now it is the so-called electronic-like coding system, then if it were changed to optical, then 98% of the energy it uses could be saved by making those 0-1 changes there optically. So this means that such projects are coming, and without a doubt this huge electricity consumption of data centers, what is being advertised now, is currently a bridge, that it will be in a few years. So is it some 2.50% of all Finnish electricity production going to those data centers? In other words, the electricity needs of data centers are being vastly overestimated. Of course, these shadow masochist reactors, SMR reactors, and all that other crap are sold here. I was watching right there, what Tully had in Kokkola. There is Ivarita Karela, Not Irida Corolla, there was already this Hikila. That Hikila, 23 minutes. Hikila was absolutely pulsating, there was no sense at all. There was not a single person there who knew anything about wind power, and the telling thing was that Ivarenta had not been paid enough money. He was also half an hour late from the meeting. That it wasn't just this kind of danger, and the whole thing, and absolutely something completely unbelievable. So then, that digital identity thing, that's what's supposed to make people completely stupid. Yes. So all purchases would be marked with carbon points. People start measuring after the carbon sector. So it's absolutely crazy to start behaving like that. People after the carbon sector, which has to be reduced in food purchases in the store, then carbon points are measured from them. And that carbon point is that, it's individual, that an apple no longer costs a certain amount of euros in the store. But it has a certain carbon point that you either have the right to or you don't have the right to, when carbon points and carbon credits aren't enough for that. Yeah. But people might go completely crazy when they impose a walking tax, and then they measure fart gases with some kind of tax, that there's carbon dioxide emissions. How many farts do you fart in a day? Should we stick sensors up our asses to measure those farts and pedestrian tolls and bicycle taxes and so on? The truth is, if you give the psychopath elite your little finger, they will take your whole hand after that, and you will lose everything in freedom if you give even a small little finger to a psychopath in practice. That's what this is about. It's an interesting thing that these Putins, and I just watched the pipe when you said that when Russia comes, the Finns have 1 hour to live. I don't really feel that the one who liberated it will be burned out of the ground. No, I'm a little surprised that these are the ones who are still alive. No need to, but anyway, hey, the Ukraine conflict, if you analyze it from the perspective of nuclear power again, then the reason is quite clearly that Ukraine probably wanted to shut down those nuclear plants there, and then it was escalated with this war, because Russia still represents nuclear power. The nuclear power monopoly MOX fuel, among other things. So Finnish nuclear power has a deal with suppliers to burn MOX, and it is valid until 2030. This means that all MOX fuels for both the Loviisa plants and also the other nuclear power plant, the straw bales for the first, second, third will be with Russian MOX fuel until 2030. It's interesting that it's not talked about publicly. You found it somewhere. That report will exist by that year 30, and they talk a lot about it, that something mysterious else is being used a lot. All the special burners for sadomasochistic reactors are 100% made in Russia. That's why these piano reactors, other thorium reactors, and other shit are being launched so damn hard here in Finland. They are all 100% under Putin's thumb. Absolutely everything. Then, there's the housing thing, the so-called Energy Efficiency Directive. What is this? Yes, it means that Finland is also committed to the Energy Efficiency Directive set by the Swiss Economic Forum website, and that means that all properties, or houses, in EU countries must comply with Energy Class D before 2033. What does that mean in practice? Well, it means that these real estate companies, apartments and owners will have to spend hundreds of thousands of euros on forced renovations to make this apartment a Class D Energy Efficiency Directive, a standard apartment. Then if you can't find the money, then the same thing as moving to a cheaper apartment, and moving to a cheaper apartment, it's always a smaller apartment. Then if you use common sense, smaller apartments, then less often any couples live in a 20 square meter doghouse. Then people move to more cramped apartments. There will be those 15-minute cities, where governments don't need to ban any socializing between men and women, if we can get those shits out of the apartment small enough. Move to a cheaper apartment. Move to a cheaper apartment. Move to a cheaper apartment, and this will create the so-called zero-growth green transition. The green transition has come up with fancy technical terms and salon-worthy words with which to mislead people so that they don't understand what this is about. They want to destroy all nuclear families, turn people into drug-addled zombies who can take fentanyl to the streets, and there's the green here and there, and the rural areas, instead of nuclear power plants, instead of uranium mines. That's Finland's green transition plan. And then if you think about forcing people into 15 square meter houses, no family will be established there, and no children will be taken there. That's a pretty obvious thing. Then there's no room for a doghouse. That's what it's all about. Then they're just people living alone. There's nothing else to do in the house except go to sleep, besides work. It's not like it's all the time, just work, work. Yeah, that's the way it is, close to sleep. But then, there's also the fact that right now, this fourth industrial revolution is already underway. So it means that all these physical jobs will disappear by 2040 and the 50s at the latest. But when the idea is that when a person loses their job, they lose their identity, then the family breaks up and generally a person who loses everything, this is what it looks like after that. Here you can see those people from the green transition. Yeah. Fentanyl and all the thumbs up there. This is a picture of San Francisco. This is what it looks like. Yeah. This is the so-called final disposal center of the New World Order. That's what it looks like. So this is being driven into every EU country. Yes. In Helsinki, the streets of Helsinki will look like a stable in the future if we don't manage to fix or solve the drug problem. No, not from this group of people. No, the protests come from this group. Look, that's the idea of the thing. And then anyway, that Friday bottle policy, the same thing. So even if they're drunk and then plan a revolution, then the next day they're hungover and they don't even have a job to even think about it when their head hurts so much. Yeah. And then, that digital identity transition, that's what Britain is now testing first. They're seeing how it works in Britain. Then if it doesn't quite work out there, they'll try to apply it here in Europe. So it's exactly the same thing as in this Corona passport mess in New Zealand and Australia, and we saw how they got it to go deep and how people decided. It was an obedience test in practice. It is obedient, and that is why it is sought all the time. Yes, people have become so sheep that they don't protest anything, but yes, when you watch, yes, when there is a windmill and solar power is opposed, then you will still find a bird that is jealous. Is it a neighbor with rent taxes or something similar or free electricity like ours? This is absolutely horrifying to these gentlemen and decision makers. This kind of activity must be brought to an end. Yes, there, as I asked that person in that chat room, I asked this, and he is such a thing that a power plant, when it is a neutron in a career, when it leaves in a straight line, it has to rotate a little like the same way as a television electron cannon. So the electron rotates, so that it doesn't get that wheel to spin, and he said that he doesn't have any information available that would point to such systems. And I have to admit that unfortunately I didn't see the system when the reactor outer walls were made, that the magnetic blocks were embedded in them. I can't really say exactly what this magnetic system is, but the fact that neutrons can be influenced by wheel objects. It can be seen in the photographs that are taken from there, that on top of the reactor it does rotate in that outer space. Then when you go outside it rotates in such a huge cycle, Was it 1.6 kilometers? It rotates in the opposite direction, upwards, yes. There is this magnetic burning that was talked about, and then it takes it takes those hadrons from there in space. You have to hack the reactor, then get it to burn, and the worst components from there. All the uranium goes to shit there, so to speak, and there are elements like that. I have to say a little bit, but the truth is that the economy is at zero growth, so it is already at this level. Even those who work are homeless in Finland. Yeah, and that's it. People just don't start families and don't have many children projects. Yes, it immediately narrows the head this side to you, dad, to go in that direction, that you like that thing. Otherwise few people have wondered about that thing, why sometimes there is such a thing when the plague came to Europe from that direction, India from that direction, and that there has been surprisingly little discussion on this topic, that the migration flow coming from that direction, the so-called migrations of peoples, so it has a pretty strong simple system. So when those people came from there, they had on average a much better mental capacity to withstand the plague than the European white population, and that's an interesting thing. It's still visible today, which is why, for example, the so-called gypsies and Jews, and what came from there, they survived on average much better than these Europeans. The Europeans wondered about it. I don't remember exactly. You could actually ask how many of the European people the plague killed, when in my opinion it was about half, or at least the numbers were absolutely horribly large. It affected this whole structure. This kind of thing is still visible today. Yes, it was probably quite a lot then. In the 14th century, it was about 25 to 60% of the population, or so. This is only 25 to 60% that it didn't happen, like around 1347 to 1351. Then some studies suggest up to 50, even 50 million deaths suggests continuations. Yeah. Then in London and Hamburg 60 to 70% of the population died, while in Eastern Europe and Ireland the effect was, so to speak, less. But then it was found that this epidemic did not spread. Scandinavia, France and West Germany and Greece and Central Europe experienced high mortality rates, while in Eastern Europe, Ireland and Spain the effect was milder. Yeah. Spain had so many Arab genes. When the plague was there, it is in the population, and when it comes from the idea, the genetics, then there is more of that plague resistance in that population. And for example, just like I explained, and then it caused the plague, for example, just why some black people started to hate it. So there was just this wonderful system. It was thought, like, in a way, they have some kind of exorcism or something like that. You don't know why they are spared, and these basic citizens went, or something. And there again, it already goes back to why these. And then you remember the plague when the Mongols came over, the same thing happened. So the Mongols withstood the plague much better, as they were from those areas where the plague had raged for centuries before. Or maybe they had a ready immunity to it. They had some kind of super immunity because it was ready then. And that's why they didn't, specifically the Mongol army. It was completely impossible to stop the plague killings here. Basic evasions. They could have withstood the Mongols much better. Hey, by the way, for the viewer's information, you can press that button. The more you press it, the more that stream spreads in the algorithms. Have you heard that? Now, they say Trump is angry. Was it Kasu who explained it? They say Trump is very angry with the Canadians, that he almost declared war on the Canadians, when there has been some wonder if the 70 million was put into some Trump insulting video, and I just watched a clip of that. Now, there must be some kind of politics, so to speak, that they usually don't see. So in real politics, there is always that characteristic that there is some kind of fuss or something. Yeah, that's right. It's always that fuss, like it has some purpose or a so-called script. Well, it's like I just saw this, what I saw on the Coquelin anti-wind evening, for example, that yes, big money made TV, they're spending millions of dollars every year for that, they're killing all the alternative energy sources, and nowadays the situation is like that. So no one thought about it, like the guys. All the peat production and geothermal in the world. And everything has gone down. Now they're so let's do it. Even now when it was here in the Pori area, what's up? A biofactory is coming here. Such big public events about whether it smells and whether it's harmful. And there are terrible problems with that. Nothing else is suitable for these gentlemen anymore. Like the Russian nuclear power industry. And that was a big article, I just watched it. So it was Fortum and the Swedes. Now then Vattenfall and Fortumi are joining forces. Let's start doing these big nuclear power plants again, right? Even though the boss of Fortum just said that it's not worth building large nuclear power plants. When they are so unprofitable, nothing will come of it. But now it is said that the state will provide billions in funding for this, so that we don't have to continue with these big Russian nuclear power plants. And then he brought the message quite directly that there are those nuclear scumbags there, in a way, to those Fortum executives. Then, starting from dinner, they offer all the bribes they can find in Switzerland, that the purpose is to stay in nuclear power even after the MOX deal. Yeah, that's it. And what they are now driving there, as if in the shadows, is that once uranium energy, positive uranium, has run out, we will move to the plutonium economy, because that uses waste that is 1,000 times more dangerous. And that's why they're changing all the old, let's say 80-year-old, nuclear power-related secret safety regulations and provisions. All the Jimmy cartels of the world and others, everything is being systematically scrapped. That is, they're bringing that plutonium-poisoned district heating to the Helsinki area as well. That is, the plan is to build 10 sadomasochistic reactors here in Helsinki to stomp on plutonium gas directly, and just make every house smoke, and then specifically to every half of the provinces, because once there's no more money for anything, so let's force municipalities to do these wonderful things. I mean, peat was the only thing for that. When they have done wood burning, all these when district heating was done before, they are forced to buy them. So these expensive, sadomasochistic reactors are used in practice. And they still have something like this. Their efficiency is raised so high that even normal nuclear power loses 1/3 of the energy. 30% of the energy with plutonium. But these new generations do it, 60-90. Even the NPP was right. This is what this SAT says. Up to 110% of the energy comes from plutonium, in reality. They are looking for a completely full head. Like here, like 56 here, like in England. When there are accidents with plutonium systems. But now they are forcing this terribly dangerously, and without controlling the plutonium economy here in every home. And no standards or obstacles are left for it anymore. So everything is possible and impossible, for example. Now I heard something like this, that the 400 kV line could not reach, for example, wind power. And it has been nothing when it has been consecrated. This is like a nuclear triangle where this pollution runs to its core. Now we are going to demand in Friaria that it was it this? The body of the Helsinki energy plant. So you have to start doing the 400 kV lines yourself, renovating and maintaining Friedi. They will no longer keep them in good condition in the future. And now they will open a direct power line to these, the toxic plutonium. And that's what is happening there. So incomprehensible. They have been banned for 80 years in practice. All those solutions should be there. But now they are putting down all the nuclear safety laws. Nothing is left. No stone is left unturned. There was also that, when we have discussed this publicly before, that it is exciting, those power lines, when you see what they look like, so yeah. There are those devil horns visible there, so yes, like someone who is not a Bomatite, so yes, they don't hide it, all the electricity poles don't look like that, but so yes, you can see that the devil value in atomic electricity goes there. There is no question about the wind power plant. So it must be emphasized that at the moment, Unit 1, no wind power company is allowed to put electricity into the atomic triangle, which is many thousands of kilometers long, between Olkiluoto and Loviisa and Pyhäjoki. So where you spend billions, you can't get there. I do wonder when there is this Juhani, Pluto is good. Now, tell me in your own words, Juhani, how do you see Pluto as good? Pluto is 1,000 times more deadly than the current one, and the atom taught us even then that uranium is a deadly substance by looking at it. Yes, I would gladly let that Pluto come to Juhani's yard, but I wonder when Juhani pushes this Pluto into all of us, so to speak, the far third. What's good about it? In Russia, this was tested when Russia was in the late 80s, and said that for a month, this Pluto-based district heating was pulled, and then thousands of people started dying in East Karelia. There wasn't really good feedback about it, but maybe it's just good. There seemed to be too many Russian deaths anyway. Maybe Juhani is crystallizing this. Yeah, and then my career in Chernobyl was so good that this happened to the helicopter. Plutonium did a trick with that one, and there was a nuclear leak and a nuclear accident. Yeah, you see, as a whole. Just right. But where does this kind of atomic excitement really come from for people? Doesn't it come from uncertainty more? Yeah, that's a lot of money to talk about. No, yes, it's like these articles, what's here too, these atomic scumbags, here there's such a big money tree, yes, it's Ivarita Korho, and then when Heike was watching, Heike also said yes, it's great to come to this meeting, when it was like, you know. The gold dust was brought there, and it was offered and others in his place. He really praised it that it was great to come here to the event, and I asked this question, otherwise this matter. You said they are people of that level. These don't really raise money and others, that they don't move with big money and yes. It's like you see that this was done by a lottery, and as you can see this discussion when it goes like that. There's no technical or idea or basis for it. But it's just these hollow slogans when they are thrown without any basis. They don't give them any kind of basis. As if you know the idea is that wind power, by the way. I just asked in the chat how much the nuclear lottery pay to the MP. What is the answer? Direct donations, donation arrangements. In Finland, political parties can receive donations from companies, but donations above a certain limit must be reported. Large nuclear power companies can donate to political campaigns, but in Finland, the amounts are relatively moderate. Typically thousands of euros. Thousands of euros to tens of thousands of euros. There are meetings, events and trips. The lottery can pay politicians or former politicians a fee for making reports and statements, for example. That is, if nuclear power is praised, plutonium, uranium are called for, then the amounts can vary from a few thousand euros to tens of thousands of euros. Indirect influence. That nuclear phase-out money can be used to finance research, milking opinion campaigns, which can indirectly benefit the goals of certain politicians. And then in Finland, the exact amounts received by individual members of parliament from nuclear power plants are not known, or the amounts received from nuclear abolitionists are not known, because the donations go through the parties. That's why it goes to Finland, the abolition budget of Euratom, and the nuclear power industry associations was millions of euros annually, but then the politicians get a small slice of it. That's how it goes in Finland. Yeah. That's how it goes. So like talking money? Yeah. And then, there's also the fact that there are also those nuclear propaganda videos in schools. I remember when we were shown those VHS videos in our elementary school, where uranium rods boiled, and then it was like an entertaining film, where they showed that nuclear power is such fun entertainment. That nuclear power is produced, so it's such harmless entertainment in a way. Yes, indeed. Yes, that's an exciting thing, and when not, and then this, what we're putting in this presentation, for example, a fusion reactor, these, so even Satvik said that the big nuclear power monopolies that have kept it. So the idea of nuclear power is that it's so dangerous and difficult and controlled. It can't be privatized, and that's a key thing, and now they're having difficulties, they say. If this fusion reactor comes, it's so much safer and healthier technology that there's a risk that it will leak out to private entrepreneurs and municipalities and stuff like that. And you say that now this physical side is in a panic and is investing and spending huge amounts of money on the fact that a fusion reactor is always only 50 years away, and that's why Germany did this thing. These are those open connection papers, and how to make that reactor. Stop being so abrupt that we have ready to operate fusion reactors, but anyone can make one. And that's the point, that nuclear power doesn't even accept technologies like the hydrogen reactor. That is, they're against it too, because it prevents their complete monopoly formation, when the state is constantly trying to make sure that it's 100% in their hands and under their control. That's why, for example, this gas supply and this too, as long as it's completely controlled by the state and in their hands. But then when electric cars and biofuels and other systems like that come along, there's such a terrible halo and resistance. No, what it has to stay, and that's why, for example, uranium activities are being transferred. Also, this plutonium economy SGP directly said that plutonium is again, when it is 1,000 times more dangerous than the uranium economy, then it can be more like Robert Junk said, that it should be tightened and state control, i.e. it cannot be given outside the army and the state in any case. And it is a very important thing for them. It remains sufficiently dangerous. It cannot be, its dangerousness cannot be reduced or neutralized those situations with any change or technology, and it has been frozen all the time. By the way, here is the Fukushima explosion, and this is how safe the plutonium and nuclear power can be. These were there, so we have to remember that in Japan there are currently 50 reactors in shit after that phenomenon, and 25 reactors were perforated and completely. And was it at least from the shell all that ton of plutonium content went into space and evaporated away. There were measurements made afterwards, that if someone considers it the most ideal positive thing, that 50 reactors, then what will happen then? Look, Japan has been fighting with those destroyed reactors for decades. Think about their lifetime. How much will it cost? They have spent 30 billion for each reactor. It is running without producing anything at all. What's great about this technology? We now have physical mechanical evidence of what nuclear power is at its best, and the starting point was that the world's largest plutonium load was brought there from France, which they started to use in MOOCs, as Teemu just said in that part. That MOOCs fuels were made, and the MOOC fuel result was then this what we saw there box, as the name already tells you, that it is MOOCs. Oh! And that's a deal with the Finnish state until 2030. Yeah. And now Finland is throwing all the time there, that Finland could take these most of all, and all the waste here, that we would like to take more of all the waste to Finland, that we can make a business out of it, even though the law directly prohibits the import and export of nuclear waste. But despite that, these things are constantly being traded. Yes, I have shown these in many videos, and they happened when they happened in a series. They happened, and as I would say, at least 6 of those reactors exploded in the same way, and we, and the official liturgy did not, as I remember, except the fact that a couple or 3 reactors were destroyed. 3 reactors. What else did you bring up about that? That's why in the public debate, Citroëns and others are constantly talking about the final disposal of nuclear waste. How do you take foreign nuclear waste here? Yeah. Then if you ask GPT in chat, it denies that Finland has made any deals or official decisions about this final disposal of nuclear waste. So that's a pretty schizophrenic statement, that the nuclear waste can be disposed of in Finland, but no deal has been made, but then the final disposal of the nuclear waste is planned at the same time. That no one is responsible for it, and is talking about it publicly. So what's the real point in that matter? Here's the thing, that it's just like we're drifting, that we just have to take it. Look, there's something in the background, that in 2005 there was such a law. The country that produces virgin uranium for this plutonium economy and uranium ban is obliged to accept the waste formed from it back. And when everyone knows that Finland is Europe's only virgin uranium producer, that is, with Talvivaara, then in principle the law from 2005, when it came into force, it says that Finland is obliged to accept it. So now the Finnish people are just being slowly brainwashed into this system. The law is like this. Let's pick this up, and then there's the fact that 100 billion euros have been reserved in Europe alone for the final disposal of spent nuclear fuel. So there's something like a sneeze graveyard called Think Atom here. Yeah, where people like this work. So globally, the amount spent on the final disposal of nuclear waste is said to be around 400 billion. Here I have to mention this funny thing that for example Pasiva is. So Pasiva was hacked, I don't remember the exact amount, but it was already 3.6 billion extra spending, meaning no country here has destroyed this nuclear material in the world. For example, huge amounts have been dumped in the North Sea. French English. I don't know of any cases where someone else pays for that waste, otherwise that Euro hole, then where are they going to go to melt it down? That's what it's about. And so, you have to remember here, when they say that you're going to make $1 billion business out of that, you really have to remember, Russia, Russia received this Finnish uranium waste from Loviisa for decades. It didn't pay a single lat for that waste. Not a penny, that is, no sums were ever exchanged for the reprocessing of nuclear waste, from which it suddenly became valuable. Someone would start paying for it when England and France dumped it into the North Sea off the coast of Holland. Every half of that waste was never paid a single lat, not a penny. So this is an interesting story, that history doesn't know of any cases where it was paid for. You take it, you waste it. If you treat this and that as waste, you pay. And suddenly they start claiming that there's a lot of money involved, of course. There's a sum of hundreds of millions going on, like I said. Posov has spent $4 billion in tax money right here, and I don't know what it is now. The amount is probably much more. But I've never heard that any country would have paid, well, if you take this to the dump. They'll pay this and this much because you never paid anything and it's just been drummed up. I remember when the Italian church buried the core. It was like these Arctic and other Rocky Mountains. There was this kind of mafia-driven. Dark, that's what this Swede said straight back then in that whole thing about eternity. He says, yeah, I don't remember, no, because it's already like that in both of them, and it must have been in the fire of the atom. Yeah. That's what he said, that the maximum would be 50 years, they would stay there, that is, they would immediately start watering and the gas nuclei would be one after another. That is, it would turn into ion gases, which would start bubbling up from there, and these bastards know exactly what they are doing. We are just given the image that it's like a brick that points there, and it's a 100,000-year thing. And that's not really how it behaves boiling. From there, ions start to erupt. It comes at the atomic level and turns into gas. There are all the noble gas series there, so everything turns into this. And what else would they be interested in discussing this nuclear power in depth again, when we have had this deep-rooted discussion before? So what is the secret of radioactive nuclear power? If you didn't say that when you were working there, you said that your superiors had seen demonic figures jumping out of the reactor hall at night. So elemental beings that cannot be explained by human reason, they are demonic beings of the dark spirits. Yes. Well, someone can call them devils, or if someone has seen them, it is related to nuclear power, it is related to radioactivity, it is related to negative energy. And then if we draw the conclusion from this that nuclear power is basically a portal of some dark spirits, which has been inside the earth. This is a very interesting topic to investigate even on a scientific level. And then why ordinary people are not told about such things? Nowhere. They just try to tell us all the time. Nuclear power is a great thing. Plutonium is safe. Nuclear power is safe. Then when nuclear power explodes, so what then? Japan is giving up nuclear power. No discussion. No one is allowed to discuss this issue. No. And that's why there are quite a few of us nuclear activists in Finland, Arto and I. And very few dare to talk about these things, and very few even know about these things. That's even more so when there are too many idiots in favor of nuclear power. Yeah, and that's a really important thing, just in the last resort when you think about it. For example, in Ukraine, when you see from the first day that a nuclear war broke out, a nuclear war will break out. Well, nuclear power hasn't been used here. There's no way to do anything about it, because nuclear power can't be used and it's just like you said. So there's nothing left to say about it other than, like, it's energy negative. It's not even energy economics. It makes weapons that can't really be used or done anything. Then, there's absolutely nothing left, but why does TD hire that black pastor? There's an atomic pastor for that. That is, it kept its expenses to a minimum. Where did it exorcise those horned heads and demonic spirits there? And there were ministers from the flag to the presidential level, as if they were swearing an oath to Satan. That's just it, and that's exactly what. It is said that we do not have it, so that we are facing spiritual powers. So this is just this manic discussion that has been there now on the internet here in the chat room. So the mania that there is with nuclear power, for example, no one has, for example, as it is said that the stone wall is perfect. The stone wall is perfect. We must preserve the stone wall. No one is talking about peat being perfect or wind power, not the sun, but it is the only symbol of the hell of eternal fire, the nuclear power of eternal fire. And think of this book for example. Look at what this Russian book from the beginning of 1900 talks about these systems. How these systems already talk about when they talked about the Philosopher's Stone. Radium was hyped as the Philosopher's Stone because it is a substance that could change an element into another, namely lead into gold, as in principle it is their method, namely whoever gets the Philosopher's Stone and controls its power, controls the entire universe. We're talking about controlling the fires of heaven and all that. That includes, well, it's one of the world's greatest, absolutely greatest religions, the nuclear cult, and it's still around today. It even beats out Islam and Christianity. And then what was the NAC code name for the Soviet Union's heavy ICBM missile? It was Satan. That's the word for Satan. That's right. And it's an interesting thing that it's a good bet. It's really an interesting thing here that the name of the missile is Satan. That's the great, great Satan that comes down from the sky and determines the fates of human nations. And that's the eternal fire. Look, when they say that it burns for hundreds of thousands of millions of years, the radiation that once it's been started. Yeah. So it's not a coincidence. That's exactly the fire of hell, which is like the hallmark of Satan, and all the whole systems are involved in it. That's it. So let's take another example. Remember the cult of the Man of Steel. The Man of Steel cult actually had no basis. It tells about America. When America developed nuclear weapons, the Man of Steel cult came to it. And there was such an exciting detail in it. People wondered if it was kryptonite, which it couldn't tolerate. That green glowing strange substance. That's right, it's exciting. The TV part of the nuclear power plant work was feared the most. It was xenon or krypton, it comes from it. So a gas formation that is a neutron trap and well, a poison reactor is extremely dangerous. So the atomic man is afraid of xenon precisely because it is. Then, there is samarium in it, as I remember. Samarium is another thing that is feared, a pair of neutrons, which is SOSO. Its atomic number is 54 in the periodic table and belongs to the noble gases. It is colorless, odorless, non-toxic, chemically very reactive at room temperature. Yes, the intensity is much higher than the free one, that is, the 5.9 G liters. Then this is quite interesting when that xenon is used in illuminating projectors, xenon lamps, in medicine, in an electrochemical anesthetic door, and in lasers as well. The light shield is a roof, you see. There is also an element in it. It is a light shield. So yeah, and then this is, by the way, now we went to the deepest end, that if we look at what Lucifer's energy is, then it is probably, we are now quite at the most secret core of the truth. It is that light, but it is the wrong kind of light. And when xenon becomes this Lucifer sickle or ray, which comes from this so-called, what do they say now, that it comes from a kind of triangular spiral, or what is that word? Through the triangular spectrum comes this Lucifer light. It is the wrong kind of light. That's the secret, like the Freemasons swear their oath to this entity, which they don't understand, that it's not the holy source of light, but it's the wrong kind of light. It's the rebellious spiritual light. And here's the thing that the Freemasons are hiding. And all these Illuminati, I don't know if they're so stupid that they realize. It's the wrong kind of thing they worship. Yes. And there's something, I was watching there, it's something Russian, which tells about how this Satan has been cursed to that darker hell. So it's explained there that there is no real light in hell, but there is, just like you said, this wrong kind of light. It's just this that's there. It could even be called the so-called black light. I've seen live, for example, when they talk about the Zerankoth light from under the reactor, there's such an exciting thing about it. When you look at the uranium rod, there's such a completely black veil around it. So a completely black veil, But when you take a photo of it, it's completely bright light. So the light that comes from it, it's like an overlight coming in, and how do you say it? It's not visible light. It's ultraviolet light. It's an overlight, and it's an exciting thing that everyone knows when they talk about Cherenkov light, the light that's around the uranium rod. So notice the uranium rod used in the experiment covered it, so it gives completely black. It's more than black. There was no visible light at that point when it emits it, and then there is a kind of blue-violet veil around it, however, through which it comes that system, and it is an interesting thing indeed. When you take the light, there is an X-ray, and it has very radical ultraviolet, but the eye does not see it as light, but it sees it completely from memory. There is no light component at all, because the radiation has driven the light-producing electrons, the valence electrons, all out of that area. That is why it is so, in fact, and only it's human. In fact, my view of the matter is in a way like what this curse of Lucifer is. That the energy that prevails here is the energy of Lucifer. It is dangerous light. It is how a human being cannot perceive with the eye, and that is why it takes, of course, quite a spiritual thing to explain. But the reason for the explanation to the artist is the wrong kind of light, and that is why the wrong kind of things mean a lot in this world. For example, grabbing money, fame, appreciation. Yeah. The Illuminati has built that society on these very values, and it is based on these Lucifer-like energies. So in a way, they worship God, something that is not God, is not part of God, is not holiness, but it is precisely the things that contain this aforementioned energy. And that's where the secrets of Lucifer's curse come from. You know, Lucifer's territory begins. He is a light-bringing angel. So he was beautiful. Yes, that was it. It was the planet Prince. Originally, it is true. But on a planet the size of Prince, if you are a spiritual being of that level, then you must not succumb to pride. That is already one original sin in practice, and in that world it even means succumbing to pride. Then that is enough for you to lose your permits. And that is exactly what happened to Lucifer. Yeah. After which he then cast his curse, and this planet of ours is still under the Lucifer curse. Yeah. And that's the cool thing, that the light's really, that when you see photos of that uranium rod, you see light in it, but when you see it live, you see just black in it. And that's exactly what they were talking about there, that the wrong kind of light, that it's practically X-ray regulation. It's so strong ultraviolet that the human eye doesn't detect it in that system. And that's the cool thing, that there's really this wrong light groove, and it's emphasized in that, like they say even about Steel or Hulk or Spider-Man. All of these cultures contain the radioactive element, and how radioactivity gives them great powers. And these are the classics that are really maintained by pop culture. And that's the cool thing, all these superheroes, maybe even Aquanka Reed, but it's also with Aquana. Remember that Super Stupid and that Pluto, Pluto's dog, Pluto, and so on. They're also there, but they're a little more hidden. Yeah, that Pluto dog, if you think about it, there's no such orange dog, but that's just what it is. When Pluto was invented, Disney included it in that cult system, the Pluto Boys, that nice little lap dog, which is quite stupid and simple, and does all sorts of commercial tricks there. But it's a fallacy there too. You see, all these cultural figures are surrounded by radioactivity, and that's what we saw when we saw the planets in the sky, all of them, Uranus and Neptune and Saturn and all of them. So they are directly Satan's cults. They are all like these nuclear power related ones. There is a real Uranus, by the way, Juhani Julianen, who look at the exposed Masonic secrets. So look at a little refresher course. My mother, what do you say in practice? The old oath at each degree, and that going there happens in practice in such a way that you have 3, or after you have been accepted as a Freemason after various stages, Then you go to the lodge and swear the first oath. The operation in the Freemason lodge is such that each Freemason is considered to be like a religious temple, where there is a temple room in the middle of the lodge, an altar, and in the east sits the venerable master and the other brothers then around it. And there at the altar of the lodge is God's holy Bible open. And there on the Bible is a right triangle and a harp, which also describes certain things in that ritual. And you swear these oaths without really knowing what you are swearing. You don't know what the secrets are that you are not allowed to say. In practice, now that I have clarified this matter, and it has become clear to me that these oaths are not secrets at all. They can be found in almost every book. One good and reliable one is Anchor Ben Belden's Secret Doctrines of Freemasonry. These oaths can be found here. They can be found online and so on. Justin. So you are actually swearing a useless oath that you will keep such secrets that can be found here. But is there any way that when you personally take that oath, you are somehow committing yourself to the spiritual power that is in it? Yes, you don't notice it. You don't even notice that the whole activity takes place so close, let's say, with a hint of Christianity, that you don't even notice that you are dealing with, you could say, a false religion. I could read this here in the first paragraph of the Statutes of the Grand Lodge of Free and Authorized Masons of Finland. So here is the faith of a Freemason, and it goes like this, that there is one God, the Father of all people. Father is with a small letter. The Holy Bible is the great shining star of Masonry, the confirmer of our faith, and the guide to our behavior. Man is immortal. Man's moral character determines his fate. Love of neighbor is the closest thing to love for God, man's first duty. Prayer is man's connection with God that brings help. So this is what a Christian man should be like. Is it a Finnish man? So in that way he thinks that this is in line. This is in line. But that person who is a believer, that has studied this Christianity more closely, and knows the role of Jesus Christ, and through what means it is possible that man's future and eternity are attainable, knows that at least not behind this. Yes. But is this exactly the veil of lies that is disguised here, as if the enemy of the soul dresses up as an angel of light? So what has been done here is that it is said that if there is even 9%, as if somehow quoted, then 10% is poison. Yes. Yeah. And that 10% makes the whole broth poison. Yeah. That I work exactly like this. So that is such a big delusional doctrine or delusional opium in its entirety, which, among others, Albert Pike, who is this guru of Freemasonry from the United States, who is sworn in by that name in Freemason circles at a high level, so that he has stated that Freemasonry so consciously misleads the members of the organization at lower levels and outsiders, or messes up and confuses, so that this heresy or this delusion can be kept on top of it all the time. At what point when you say that 33 different levels, at what point does a person notice that which spiritual power is leading them? It will definitely come, and I could say that the final nail will only be found in the 33rd degree of the Freemasonry, where it is revealed that the god of the Freemasonry is Lucifer. There it was. There it was. Yeah, that's crystal clear. Then it happened, and he was found dead under an ATV a few weeks after that interview. Oh! Oh, he was an ex-Freemason who had left the Freemasons. So then, they took revenge on him, by finding an ATV half a year later. Yeah. They have that style on TV too. They are so merciless. They don't accept any deviation from these. Well, it's a canopy. Here it came again, just nuclear power. Nuclear power got the news that the crashed ATV is found dead. Then a few weeks after that interview, it's quite a trick to drive your own ATV over yourself. So it probably didn't happen anyway, it was probably staged. Yeah. But it is true that there are a lot of free dialects in churches. That is also true. It is not that it is a completely clear thing, that, and so even the pastors, they are all like. I would say that in Olkiluoto a black atomic pastor was hired. So yes, that says something. In the second decade, I don't know how many of them managed to be there, but it never produced anything. Like, no one asked for anything for sure. I sometimes asked what the pastor is here for when he never held services, and I never saw him, so to speak, praying or doing any of these Christian procedures. But whenever there were these exorcism rites in the RH hall, I would summon horn heads to the scene. It was so there was always a black pastor there doing them, as a master of the service. Like messing around. But this is almost a state secret, but it comes to mind that it is a state secret. The moon in the nuclear power plant, the black pastor in Denis, yes, at least in public, we probably don't discuss things like this. No, he said that when the film was made, the atomic bomb was still in the preview. So I went to watch it, and this pastor said that before we had Jesus. But now we have nuclear power. And Daniel was very excited when he was able to keep this statement until the end. But then when it was brought to the theater, then TVO demanded that it must be removed. That such and such a statement cannot be kept if it was forcibly taken away from there. But I have seen the original clip, where it said that before we really had Jesus, now we have nuclear power. So it says exactly that this eternal Satan worship cult will be displayed specifically. Well, it is almost missing that uranium rod in the place of the cross, what they wave in those religious rituals. Yes, it is. And there was a cross there, they say. That's the one with that right, that's part of the essential part of how things work. So that's how it just explains the career, that there's really a thing that's put up. It was the hard work that what I found there. Samaladinma, they're near the first Finnish king's coffin. So that's where this rite was held when Akumatila went to exorcise those curses away from it, and so on, used it, and in the end it ended up with that mystical bronze sword with a silver plate as if it disappeared, and I was warned that you can't take it, that the police will come and get you from your house. It was probably the secret ritual sword of the rappers, then like that it was a Molenbost. Wasn't it a copy of that replica? It wasn't the original, but it was a replica. It was a replica, and there was still so-called silver where Hanford's coordinates were. And just that year when Montokoivisto made the Maitrana agreement with the entire Finnish territory, the use of nuclear power industry was straight at 80 a little before Chernobyl moves 86, so exploded then, so there was a task, and then there is another picture when Montokoivisto died, so then the sword had been gone for a while, and then when I showed it, so it was only about a week when I went next time. Look, it is mystically all the sword was there on Montokoivisto's orders, and when Montokoivisto died, so there was permission to take it out of there. I had made it way too public, and I should not have found it in any case. It is related to that still, that it is like a special person who finds that sort it involves all sorts of activities. Really, they are those Illuminati enough. And that's why I had to call Illuminati meetings half a year ago. After that, what's going on now, not when you mm. It was chosen when there was at me, so then tried to touch you in a way like that's what would have happened if you had joined then. They would have tried to control then. That now Arto is quiet, then he belongs to the Brotherhood, yes, the secret trapper group, then he will give orders then, because that's how it goes. The law is that if you are a Freemason, you have to follow the orders of those higher Freemason in practice. That's right. Here is a table that can be found online, and it is claimed that these are the kings of Finland. Then you can see how they are, how they have now spread through the family line, that it is directly related to the king of Sweden, these kings of Finland, and the kings of Sweden are the kings of Norway. Everything is practically the same bloodline. But that sacred desecration has happened at a point when you are not allowed to tell Finns that there was a kingdom here at some point. It is just a myth in the public debate who destroyed the information and why it was destroyed. Probably because the Finns are such a slave nation, they want to keep them in such a realistic position as elite Swedes. And then, they burned the 6-story building in the 18th century, which contained these documents related to the Kingdom of Finland and others, and then the fire went with it, and the National Museum Board is sitting on top of that secret today. It doesn't matter to them. Yeah. That definitely included these Vaticans then in this right. So the Vatican is within, that's exactly what it wanted to do. Finland was at that time, even during the Viking era, it was strongly Orthodox Christian, and the Vatican wanted to drive it out of Finland, that doctrine, and hired the Swedes to eradicate that orthodoxy from Finland, and then out of it with those so-called crusades, so in my opinion. The crusades that took place in Haim, there were German Bronze Knights who handled those operations. There was too much resistance here. So then with the right to tax, those German knights were made to handle the job until the end. Yeah, I haven't heard the church word, circus Czech. What did you say? Yeah, that's how much it comes from. ChatGPT says that the word church comes from an ancient Germanic word in Finnish. So it comes from the German word kyrki, and then in Sweden it's kyrka in Swedish. But so this ChatGPT answers this, that it comes from the Greek word kyria, which means a building belonging to the Lord. Then through other Germanic languages it has then ended up in Finland in the form church, so this corresponds here, or kyriakon is that like the Greek word, so it's cool when there is an Orthodox church in Greece, and it is indeed, it used to be much bigger, and yeah, in the circus there is a director. Who leads the whole orchestra in a way, yes, there are certain features going on there. It's pretty pumped up. Maybe it's about something like this to drink, and then it's a cool thing. The circus ring has always been a tent, and this has these similarities. Yes, tent meetings are still talked about, and so well the current circus is like on television in a way. So the television fifth industry, and then those pitch countries, then football matches. So that's the current circus. Yeah, yes, bread and circus. Fun, so to speak. Yeah. Yeah, that's quite true. So many politicians go through the training in Poland, among other places. Yes, ex-Prime Minister Donatus, that's the name of the education system, and yes, it's strongly part of the Catholic Church. Yes, they have everything under strict control. Yes, there are facts and other things. Yes, the purpose is to take everything, so to speak, or to make the whole religion eggless. That's the purpose, shame and disgrace, and all. That's why they want it. That's the purpose. And the purpose is that these Illuminati Jesuits want to destroy the state church. So when the state church is destroyed, in its place, in practice, people are put into an atheistic mode, where they question the religion of the deity. Yes. And we get such a moral decay that there is a so-called New World Order or green transition. What term do I want to use for it? Yes. Don't they bring more than 100 Jesuits? Or wasn't even a young man a Jesuit? Doesn't that sound like a really small amount of money? To put it mildly, Jesus seems to be a slightly bigger title in practice in that world. Many can belong to those knighthood, but then, that knighthood and status doesn't mean Jesuit, but that Jesuit. That requires your own training and practice. But Junu is far along in that pattern. When he really has lineages, then he's a witch. I don't know now that he moved abroad, so maybe he can get additional training there. At least he's very publicly proud of it. How else should I put the stream on? Or what do you say? Yeah, there's almost an hour and a half to go, but hey, still to the viewers. So yeah, you get so many likes with wrestling, and you get the stream to spread, and you can subscribe to the channel, and yes, here with you, yes,